For the last couple of days, I've been trying to write about waiting. What is it to wait? What is its essence, its feeling? Are we able to feel the sacred potential hidden inside of wait? Or do we only sense the pinball effect, stuck in the push-pull of pleasure and pain? I lifted text from Urban Love Monk, the long-suffering, ever-becoming book about my monk year, because there's an entire chapter titled Wait. You'd think I could milk something from work already done. But nope, my material on the superpower of moss waiting for rain went nowhere. For today's gospel, I thought I'd landed on the sensation of waiting as the essence of the text. It's an easy leap, of course. This being the first week of Advent, the high holiday of waiting, you know, for the Redeemer, Emmanuel. But when I looked up both the etymology of the word wait and the Greek version of Matthew chapter 24, not that I can read Greek, my experience was unexpected. I didn't feel the pregnant hum of alert stillness, nor the diagonal lean of sacred anticipation. Instead, I felt the harsh, hammered command of watch, watch, be on alert. Watch, watch, be on alert. Watch, watch, be on alert. That is a whole different vibe. There is enough threat in those words to bred fear, to bring on spinal shivers. Excuse me. Ooh. Just knocked my ears out. There is enough threat in those words to bred fear, to bring on spinal shivers and legit wide googly eyes. Anxiety and mistrust and survival also come to mind. Turns out this passage is filled with trauma, talking about vanishing bodies and midnight thieves. Matthew brings up the whole Noah thing again, reminding us of those partiers and ne'er-do-wells who got swept away by a flood. The rest of the chapter is no less horrific. My NSRV Bible captions the remaining verses, the faithful or the unfaithful slave. Really. Verse 46 reads, blessed is that slave whom his master will find at work when he arrives. What? Sounds like the people Matthew was writing for needed some kind of savior, and quick. With this passage in Matthew, I know I'm supposed to ask things like, what does it mean to keep awake? And what are the things that distract me from attention on God? Or when God shows up, will I be alert enough to notice? Valid inquiries. I'm usually the first to unearth metaphor and symbol between the lines. I've had to make real meaning from this tradition I was given. But what keeps leaping off the vellum at me now is the brutality and inhumaneness that is simply ignored as the bread of the story. Mass drowning? No biggie. Sudden disappearances without explanation? Come on, it's the rapture. Thieves stealing from your home in the middle of the night? Don't make it your own fault. And in verses 45 to 51, we have slaves beating other slaves, controlling their food supply, seeking favor from a master that will, in the end, quote, cut you in pieces. Why don't we ever talk about those parts of the story? When reading scripture, why do we accept the context of trauma and slavery as just how things were back then? Is it because we don't care to face the way things still are? After nosediving in today's text, I found myself waiting for something to say about waiting. Reading and rereading the lines only moved me toward an emphatic need to ditch all the wait and ask a more urgent question. Why do we ignore the reality of our stories? These are our sacred stories. Here in the lineage, broadly speaking, of Protestant Christianity in the United States in 2022, I am still trying to get blood from a turnip, seeking peaceful assurances from a story that on the ground is telling me, I'd better watch out. I'd better stay alert. I'd better not pout, or I'm gonna get robbed, disappeared, or worse. This year, I've been steeped in a process I call truth learning. It means I've been doing everything I can, reading, taking classes, workshops, joining affinity groups, in order to clearly see the history of this country, to take in its hidden stories, which are filled with violence, greed, and displacement. I am centering the practice of not turning away from the depth of suffering endured for hundreds of years by Black and brown bodies on this soil. I seek also to understand my own lived experience in a white body, acknowledging the traumas encountered or perpetrated by my own ancestors and lineage. These histories reside in all of our bodies. And until we are able to feel them, name them, and share them, very little will change in us or in the systems which uphold the disparities born of trauma. It's not very surprising then to find I can't just gloss over the disturbing details of the text. They interrupt, for me, any search for underlying meaning or relationality with God. If I am implored to stay awake, let me awaken to the fact that terrible things are happening to all kinds of people in this story, and not just a story from the past, a story carried into today. The entire fabric of our culture, white-bodied culture in the United States, that is, depends on turning away from the ugly stuff, on repeating false narratives and buoying the supremacy many of us don't even realize we carry. My words are getting pretty real here, and some of you might be feeling your hackles raised. That's okay. They're only hackles. I urge us all to take a couple deep breaths. Feel what's happening inside your body. Let me be clear. I am no expert on these topics. Some of you may be much further down the road of truth learning. Lord knows I feel like a latecomer myself. And for those here in Black or brown bodies, I suspect I'm not talking about anything you don't already intimately know. But this is a trusted community. There is love here. Real love. So I'm following the words of Reverend Dr. Cornel West, who reminds us that justice is what love looks like in public. The layers of justice and injustice are old and complex and embedded. So I'm not just casually suggesting that those of us in white bodies are a bunch of white supremacists, except that we are. We are. just not in the ways those words have come to be defined. When I say white supremacist, it probably brings to mind images of sheet white, hooded ghosts of men with torches of fire and hatred on their tongues. Or maybe you pictured a burly man with a shaved head, tattoos, and scowling beside his Confederate flag. I'm seeing a reel from just a few years ago in Charlottesville, where over 100 men, Tom, Dick, and Harry's, dressed in their khakis and polos, marched with tiki torches, ironically a Polynesian cultural product, giving the Nazi salute and chanting, "You will not replace us," and "White lives matter." These are frightening images for just about anyone, including most white-bodied folk. But I'm not talking about those white nationalists. I'm talking about us, you and me, caring, well-intended people. When I say that those of us with white bodies carry supremacy, I mean that we were born into a system, a web of systems, healthcare, education, criminal justice, entertainment, to just name a few, systems created to uphold power and wealth based on the color of our skin. Systems which have consistently operated at the expense of Black and brown bodies. Systems which still do. It doesn't take a high IQ to connect the dots if you trace this country's history all the way to today. I mean, really look at the history. Understand how the displacement of Indigenous people led to the enslavement of West African people, which led to Jim Crow, which led to redlining in neighborhoods, which has led to mass incarceration and all manner of racial disparity throughout our national institutions. Human beings live and breathe within these systems, though sometimes their breath is taken. As the brilliant author Ta-Nehisi Coates puts it, he says, it is hard to face this, but all our phrasing, race relations, racial chasm, racial justice, racial profiling, white privilege, and even white supremacy serves to obscure that racism is a visceral experience, that it dislodges brains, blocks airways, rips muscle, extracts organs, cracks bones, breaks teeth. You must never look away from this. You must always remember that the sociology, the history, the economics, the graphs, the charts, the regressions all land with great violence upon the body. Right now, my heart is beating rapidly. My breath has shallowed and sweat is seeping in multiple locations. I am afraid to say these things to you. I know my words are woefully incomplete and that I won't get it entirely right, and that delivering a message which pushes all our edges might not be well received. But I can't let that stop me, and I can no longer wait for others to do the work of justice. Maybe this is why I could read the passage in Matthew and not talk about waiting. This work is urgent. It doesn't have a clear path. It won't sail in still waters and is sometimes scary and exhausting. But the work is mine. And my friends, it is also yours. Think deeply about the stories you already know. I bet many of you in the late 70s watched Alex Haley's TV miniseries, Roots. It was epic, groundbreaking. Never before had such realities and atrocities of slavery in the American South been televised. No doubt the story moved you, but I bet the accompanying feelings got tucked away sent off somewhere to the attic, joining other dusty boxes of unpleasantness, tragedy, and horror. Because we can do that. I can do that. Living in a white body, I have the supreme luxury of turning away, of boxing up stories I think aren't really about me, because my life and prosperity are not threatened or diminished in countless ways simply for the color of my skin. I've been able to remain separate from the full truth of what these stories tell, of what they reveal about aspects of the human condition, and about how we got here in this fertile land where at least 3 mass shootings have taken place since Thanksgiving. Troubled and turbulent are the times, but nothing will change until we look straight into the eyes of our past and wait long enough for its truths to be told and witnessed. Nothing will change until we unpack the boxes in the attic. I recently attended Alumni Day at Harvard Divinity School, where Dean Himpton reminded us of our charge. He said, "It's not enough to just ask the big questions. You must face them." And so here I am on this first week of Advent, speaking as honestly as I can about what I'm paying attention to. For as Coates insists, an America that looks away is ignoring not just the sins of the past, but the sins of the present and the certain sins of the future. I'm staying alert to the stories we tell ourselves and each other, and to the stories we don't. I'm minding the details, including the painful truths that live in all our bodies. And I'm watching for that little inevitable light to emerge at the edge of this tender, precious darkness. Now the ears of my ears awake, and now the eyes of my eyes are opened. Thank you for listening.